Man of Steel, the movie people love to hate. This movie was more than just another Superman movie. It went in a direction that some people weren't just ready for. As a longtime Superman fan, I was able to witness all the iterations of the Man of Steel. Christopher Reeve being the gold standard for the character and made him who he is today. Brandon Routh doing his best in a movie that tried to continue Reeve's legacy but was destined for failure. But he was able to redeem himself with his Kingdom Come run in the Arrowverse. Tom Welling, the last person to get the mantle passed down personally from Reeves himself. He gave us 10 years of Clark Kent before becoming Superman and giving us the best representations of the characters affiliated with him. Henry Cavill was the next actor to step up to the plate. Tyler Hoechlin, the last TV version of the character before David Corenswet took over the role. He delivered the greatest adaptation of Superman we've ever seen, and if you've never watched Superman and Lois, then I highly recommend it because it's absolute peak. Then there's David Corenswet's version of Superman that restored hope for the character. Not because Superman was on some character assassination like people on the internet will tell you, but because his Superman was the closest to Christopher Reeves than anyone else's. He was able to take what was great about Christopher's version and was able to add his own mix to it. Despite all of that, I still find myself coming back to Man of Steel. Now don't get me wrong, when Superman came out last year, I had the biggest smile on my face throughout the entire screening of the film every single time I went to see it. But Man of Steel still hits different for me. You see, Man of Steel was released right after the success of the Nolan trilogy, and Arrow was just starting to make a name for itself by following the same method as Nolan was, which was realism and being grounded. So after hearing that Zack Snyder was applying the same mindset with Superman was very intriguing because how do you make someone like Superman and apply realism and being grounded? I mean, he's faster than a speeding bullet, can leap tall buildings in a single bound, etc., etc. But somehow, some way, they made it possible. What Zack Snyder was able to do with Man of Steel should be right up there with what Matt Reeves did with the Batman. But if you feel like that's too big of a stretch, then I'll say what Nolan did with the Dark Knight trilogy. Man of Steel is the best looking Superman film, and I'll stand on that. The opening scene of Krypton clears every Superman film's best segment, and I'll debate you on that. Man of Steel is solely based around the comic Superman Birthright, which tells the origins of Superman in a way that hasn't been done before. Very similar to Man of Steel. It was also inspired because of Smallville, so that's huge props for that because Smallville is one of my favorite TV shows ever, so bonus points for that. What separates Man of Steel is the fact that it started with a fresh Superman. He wasn't OP like Christopher Reeves's, who can go back in time and kiss a woman so good that he can erase their memory. He was just built different. He was still learning how to fully master his powers while still doing random acts. One thing I loved about Henry Cavill's Superman was how he was born to help people and wasn't told by his biological parents like in the other movies. In Man of Steel, he's constantly saving people out of his own fruition because it's the right thing to do, despite his father telling him not to out of fear of what may happen to him. Whereas with the other movies, Jor-El and Lara tell him that he will be the planet's savior. I could be wrong about that, but I did just recently watch every single Superman movie prior to making this video, so I'm sure you'll mention it in the comments. In my personal opinion, Man of Steel has every ingredient needed to tell a perfect Superman story. Clark struggling with who he is, Lois realizing for the first time that this was more than just another newspaper story for the Daily Planet, General Zod fighting to keep a non-existing race from being completely erased. Put all of these together and you get Man of Steel. So the giant elephant in the room is the Man of Steel himself, Superman. This Superman isn't your normal Superman. On the internet, this is an aura-farming Superman that cares more about looking clean than saving people. And my response to that is so the what? If I looked like Henry Arm Reload Cavill and had a suit that clean, you think I wouldn't be flexing for the gram? It's not his fault that he looks better than the rest. Okay, on a serious note, he's not just some aura farmer. He's not a man in the sky that saves you from daddy's fists and abominations. He's simply a man. With the original Superman movies and Superman Returns, he's just Superman with Clark being second fiddle. The new Superman movie being the same, while Man of Steel focuses more on Clark becoming Superman. Yes, I know one's an origin story and the others are already established Supermen, but as time went on, Superman and Clark's story essentially became one, as fans started to care about both of their lives in comparison to just one aspect of the character. Very similar to Batman. We love his stories, but we also love Bruce's story as well, because we all know he's more than just a billionaire orphan that must watch his parents get lit up in every single reboot. But with Man of Steel, he is Clark Kent dealing with the concept of being a god in the eyes of the people on Earth. One key evidence of that is during his scene with Jonathan after saving everyone on the bus. Clark says that he just wants to be Clark Kent and nothing more. But as he got older, he wanted to find out more about where he came from, and upon realizing what he was, he went on a journey of dealing with the world seeing him as a god. In Batman vs Superman, the Day of the Dead scene mirrors this perfectly. After saving everyone, they all surround him like he's a god, and his face mirrors someone that doesn't want that title. There's even a scene in the movie where one lady is raising her arm up to the heavens, and all you see is a silhouette of Superman standing in the sky. Well, not standing, but floating. I know throughout Man of Steel, BVS, and Zack Snyder's Justice League, they show tons of references to Jesus and other Bible references, but I feel like the point of these images is to show how much of a high pedestal we put on certain figures in comparison to the creator himself. Superman has always been this god figure. This almighty being that's the savior of the planet, comes from parents that didn't conceive him personally, but raised him like he was, died for the planet and rose again. Jonathan being afraid that if the world found out about him, they would try to do him the same way Jerusalem did Jesus. Hell, even in Man of Steel, he literally hits the Jesus pose in space before saving Lois. Despite him being this godlike figure, his character is what matters most with the Man of Steel. Now, if you don't like how depressing the Snyderverse and Superman is, then I'll gladly accept that criticism because Superman is supposed to be bright and hopeful, whereas Henry is dark and depressing. But I'll just say this, the real world is depressing as well. We have a horrible president, gas is skyrocketing, prices keep increasing and making living unattainable, your hobbies are basically expensive as hell, racists and billionaires are running the world, and the list goes on. But I like to quote the great Harvey Dent, "The night is darkest just before the dawn." And that's how I view Henry's Superman. Yes, his journey is depressing, and it makes you want to be depressed as well. But we all must go through trials and tribulations before the blessing comes our way. And Superman was experiencing the same thing. His encounters with Zod, his upbringing, and his journey to becoming the man that his father knew he would always become. Superman's actions are what triggers hope. He was restoring hope to the planet in more ways people think. Batfleck's journey is a great example of this. Batfleck's been fighting crime in Gotham for 20 years now, and one day he just loses hope in everything. But when he came across a figure that remotely resembles what he lost, he saw him as a threat and wanted to destroy him. But after realizing that Superman was simply a man and that he failed him, his faith was restored in not just humanity, but himself as well. It's crazy that two of the best iterations of the characters come from a universe that everyone hates, but anyway, let's get back to the discussion. In Man of Steel, Colonel Hardy saw Superman as the enemy, telling his men to shoot on sight during his fight in Smallville. But after seeing him risk his life to save not just him, but his men as well, he realized that this man is not our enemy. Martian Manhunter is another example. If you gave up on the DCEU after BVS, spoiler warning, General Swanwick is Martian Manhunter. He's been undercover out of fear for his life, but once Superman arrived, his hope was restored in humanity. Diana as well. Having experienced multiple wars, she gave up on humanity. But after Superman's actions in BVS, hope is restored. You see the pattern here? Even in a depressing universe, Superman is bringing hope to the hopeless. Even Superman himself was feeling a little hopeless, or trustworthy in the movie because he didn't trust the people of Earth. But it was a pastor that told him, sometimes you have to take a leap of faith first. The trust part comes later. If Superman wasn't this hopeful figure, then he wouldn't have moments like, if you see his monument, look around you. Which is a reference to the architect Christopher Wren. And this basically means if you need hope, look at this monument to remind you what Superman did for Earth and to let his actions be a remembrance of that you have hope in you as well. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Perry and Lombard are trying to save Jenny while Metropolis is terraforming right in front of their eyes. Once they realize that they had nowhere to go, Perry grabs her hand and looks her in the eye to tell her that she won't die alone, and then Superman destroys the world engine and saves everyone. Now, they easily could have left her there. Even Jenny was afraid that they would do that, which is why she panicked when Perry went to go find something. But Perry's actions gave her hope in not just her making it out of the situation, but also letting her know that her co-workers care about her, while also showing the hope of humanity that Superman fights for every single day. I wanted to touch back on the grounded and realistic approach of Man of Steel. So the reason why I said in my Superman vs. the Elite video that Henry's Superman was set in this world's current state is because it basically is. After Superman revealed himself to the world in Man of Steel and living through it in BVS, it was almost like the people were ungrateful or unappreciative. This movie was a realistic representation of what people are like nowadays. But in 2019, I realized that a show was about to take that mantle and double down on it. That being The Boys. What appeared as a mockery of the Snyderverse on the outside was really a mockery of the world we live in today, minus the superpowers. They don't want to see someone like Superman who believes in what is right and wrong and someone who believes that the world can be a better place. They want to see someone like Homelander, who is unapologetic in what he says and does because that's what the world likes to see, which is why we have a certain president today. Not everyone wants a Homelander, so if it doesn't apply, let it fly. Superman saves people's lives, and the first topic of discussion on the news is, does the world need Superman? Yeah, I would be disappointed too if I was him. One scene I wanted to touch on that gets people mad for some reason is the bar scene in Man of Steel. After a trucker embarrasses Clark by giving him a beer shower, he destroys his truck by making it look like Optimus Prime in Revenge of the Fallen. To some, this is a nice funny moment, and to others, this is so unprofessional and not like Superman. Well, that's the point. This is a realistic approach to the character. Realistic to you might be knocking his head off, but that's not what Clark is. His whole life, his father has taught him to be the bigger person and always made sure that his pride wasn't hurt in the process. Yeah, he'll turn the other cheek, but that doesn't mean he won't be petty about it. I mean, Christopher Reeves did the same thing in Superman 2. After the trucker beat him up in the diner, he happily spun the block on him after regaining his powers at the end of the movie. What some people fail to realize is that it's an homage to the Golden Age version of the actual character himself. Superman doesn't like bullies and has no problem putting them in their place. So when a scene like this happens in Man of Steel, all you can do is love it. Now, I know some people didn't like it happening in Superman 2 as well, but it seemed like a bigger outcry when Henry did it. This movie is just something special. I remember the exact feeling I had watching this movie. It felt like I was having an out-of-body experience because what I was witnessing was something special. The cinematography of this movie is something you would expect from someone of Zack Snyder's caliber. Every scene just oozed with symbolic meaning and moments that will stand the test of time. If I had to compare this movie to a Superman comic in terms of visuals, I would compare it to Superman's New 52 run, Superman Unchained, written by Scott Snyder. That might be one of the best looking Superman stories I've ever read. Each page just screamed, "Look at me, I'm Superman, and I'm the greatest superhero in the world." If you want to talk about an aura-forming Superman, then this is the one you want to talk about. I know Zack and Scott share the same last name, but that doesn't mean that you had to share the same aura. Speaking of visual masterpieces, no other Superman scene on this God-given earth is touching the first flight scene. That is the greatest Superman scene of all time. It is a scene that brings not just hope, but pure belief. When that scene happens and that score kicks in, it makes you feel like you can overcome anything life throws at you. You're not entering Cloud 9, you're ascending to heaven. Seeing Superman test the limits of his powers by learning how to fly, while Jor-El is in the background giving a motivational speech, and Hans Zimmer's drummer is beating away like a madman. I'm sorry, but you can't get a better scene than that. First time flying and he already broke the sound barrier, that just proves why he's the GOAT. Not to mention, that shot of him flying in space to pay homage to Christopher Reeves was the cherry on top. But that wasn't the only homage to Christopher Reeves, because in the World Engine scene, he literally paid homage to him too. Because like, if it's easy to miss, but if you know, you know. There's literally a shot while he's powering up to destroy the World Engine. His face literally looks like Christopher Reeves, and that was so freaking beautiful. You know what? I'm doubling down. Man of Steel has the best flight sequences in Superman history. Every shot you were looking at was a cinematic masterpiece. First flight, masterpiece. Superman flying to the Indian Ocean, masterpiece. Superman flying up to destroy the World Engine, masterpiece. Even Superman floating in space was a cinematic masterpiece. If there's one thing Zack Snyder made sure to do with Superman, he made sure to get not just the flight sequences on point, but the cape as well. No other comic book film has even come remotely close to what the Snyderverse has done with superhero capes. Well, Matt Reeves did in the Batman, but that's Matt Reeves. The way Zack Snyder uses capes, he makes them like it's a character as well. The user not only looks good, but the cape does as well. In the other Superman movies, the cape basically has no identity. It's simply just a cape. But Snyder said that doesn't apply to him and added more flair to his cape than ever before. I mean, it's more than just the blanket that Kal-El was wrapped in when he landed on Earth. So I appreciate Snyder for doing that with the cape. I know I went from talking about flying to talking about capes, but let's get back to that. As I said, Man of Steel has the best flight sequences that will never be beaten. Zack Snyder showed us what it's like to see Superman fly. The best way to describe the difference between Man of Steel and the other Superman movies is that when they would fly, it seemed like they were floating. But with Man of Steel, he was flying. This Superman generates thrust, and there are visual cues that show his power affecting the world around him. When he takes off, he leaves a crater behind. When he broke the sound barrier, you can not only hear it, but you could see it as well. Even the moment of Zod learning how to fly for the first time was spectacular. The pieces of armor slightly floating as he levitates in the air was perfect. This movie brought a high standard for me when it comes to Superman films. Like, you can create one of the greatest Superman films ever made, but if it doesn't have even remotely a fraction of what Man of Steel offered, then it'll never dethrone Man of Steel for me. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about from a visual and character standpoint. Yes, Superman was a bright and colorful film, and it had a lot of great moments that still make me cheese like a kid. But it's not Man of Steel. I can look at Man of Steel and think, damn, that's a great film. I loved it just as much as I did when I first watched it. Movies like this are why I love being a DC and Superman fan. It might be a reach, but I don't care. Man of Steel is like Anakin Skywalker. It's the chosen one, and was meant to bring balance and change to the world. Whereas the other Superman films are like the Jedi Council. They have an order that's been followed for centuries that is right and doesn't need to be changed. Now, just because I said this doesn't mean I'm disrespecting the other films. Maybe as time goes on, my statement about Man of Steel will cease to exist, and a Superman film will become worthy of carrying the mantle as the best Superman film in my eyes. But until then, Man of Steel will always remain supreme. I feel like the destruction of Metropolis gets a lot of unnecessary hate. In Superman's defense, there was nothing he could do to stop that from happening. Zod literally came to Earth for the Codex and wanted to create a new home for Krypton, and destruction was the only way. This was also his first time being a hero, so he had no experience on what and what not to do. And I know you probably don't want to hear it, but this is a grounded and realistic approach. There's no way that Superman could have done what he needed to do without all of that happening, especially an inexperienced Superman at that. I was low-key trying to decide which movie was worse in terms of destruction, Man of Steel or the new Superman movie. One deals with Kryptonians, and the other one dealt with a black hole, an army, a kaiju, and a clone of Superman. Let me know in the comments which one was worse. Another controversial thing was Zod's fate. Till this day, I never had a problem with it. Zod left Superman with no choice but to snap his neck. I know people say he could have flown away. Well, if he did that, then people still would have gotten hit with Zod's heat vision. or that he could have covered Zod's eyes. And I'm like, how? If he would have done that, Zod would have just escaped, and there would have been another long fight between the two that Metropolis definitely wouldn't have survived. I know Superman is extremely strong, but do you expect me to believe that he could have held Zod in a chokehold with one arm and the other arm holding the eye, covering his eyes? I know Henry's arms are big, but come on now. Zod told him this only ends with either me dying or you dying. You can literally see Superman fighting not to kill him, but to make Zod possibly see the error of his ways and maybe change. But once he targeted the people he was protecting, he was left no choice but to snap his neck. Now, Superman chooses not to kill, but if he deems it necessary, then I'm sorry, but you're not making it to the sequel. Spoiler alert, Zod technically did make it to the sequel, but hey. But the good thing that came from the outrage of this moment was the horrendous "Tell That to Zod Snap Neck" script from Chris Struckman. If you really want to know how deep in the field someone was in the DCEU, mention "Tell That to Zod Snap Neck" and see their reaction. Interesting enough, Superman 2 had the same predicament with Zod. The only difference is that he was sugar-coated. In Superman 2, he throws Zod into an abyss and smiles while doing it. But in Man of Steel, Superman snaps Zod's neck and shows emotion, and it's suddenly pandemonium. Honestly, I applaud Arrow and Zack Snyder for taking a different route for their characters. CW's Arrow killed people until he found a better way, Superman killing Zod, and his approach with Batfleck killing criminals before changing his ways. It takes huge balls to do something like that, despite knowing how people will react to it, only for them to praise it later on. Also, the part where Jonathan tells Clark that maybe he should have let those kids die on the bus. This moment is more controversial than the rest, to be honest, because it goes against everything that Clark stands for. He's the type of person that wants to help everyone, so just simply ignoring a bus full of his classmates just seems out of character. Now, the reason Jonathan said that is because it was out of fear and the fact that he didn't want his son to be looked at as a freak or some kind of god. I mean, we saw what happened with Jesus when he displayed his powers. Imagine the entire world finding out that some kid can do things that are out of this world, especially the government. We've seen multiple times in cinema of the government raising these kids only for them to become a menace in the future. Now, I'm not a parent, but isn't it a parent's job to protect their kids and guide them on their way to adulthood? Now, John knew his son was going to change the world in a big way, but he wanted him to do it when the time was right. So when Clark watched his father tell him not to save him from the tornado, when he obviously could, it was then that he realized that his father might be right and that there are consequences every time he exposes himself. This next controversial moment that I want to talk about was from Batman vs. Superman, and it was his final moment with Lois, and the infamous line, "No one stays good in this world." I can understand the controversy behind that line because Superman is a symbol of hope and sees the good and everything and all of that, but like personally, I didn't really have a problem with that line either, because Superman was literally put in a situation where he had no choice but to kill Batman in order to save his mother. But as the story went on, we know that really wouldn't amounted to nothing, because I think because she was gonna die either way. All Lex wanted to do was to prove his statement that he told Clark on the rooftop. If God is all powerful, then he cannot be all good, and if he is all good, then he cannot be all powerful. They need to see you for the fraud that you are, and they will. But I didn't really see a problem with that. But I do understand why some people would be mad about that line. But me personally, I wasn't really mad with it. I enjoyed it. It gave more story. It gave more story to what Superman was in that universe, because despite him saying a line that no one stays good in this world, he doesn't realize it yet, but Batman's actions is a living proof and testament of that statement not being true, because his actions is what changed Batman's whole perspective of him and just the entire world as a whole. If Batman would have killed Superman right then and there, then Superman's line to Lois would have been true. But then when that happens, then the whole doomsday situation and all that, then it would have been proven again that he failed him in life. but he won't fail him in debt. So it's kind of a full circle, but let's get back to the topic. I wanted to talk about General Zod real quick. And I think Michael Shannon's Zod was not only one of DC's best villains, but the best adaptation of the character. I love Terrence Stamps' version of Zod because he displayed the character as someone that was not only superior to mankind, but to Superman as well. Zod was so much of a threat that Superman had to team up with Lex Luthor just to win. Well, he didn't intentionally team up with Luthor, more like trick Luthor into helping him. But the point still stands, he was that guy. Whereas with Michael's version, he was a tyrant with a survival of the fittest mindset that had no problem eliminating anyone or anything that got in the way of doing what was best for Krypton. Seeing as how he took over the council minutes before Krypton's destruction. One thing I liked was how quickly Zod adapted to Earth's atmosphere because it showed just how great of a warrior he is. What took Clark years to master, Zod did it in an hour. But behind every great villain is a great henchman, and Queen Fiora did her job. When we saw how Zack Snyder handled her character, we have faith that all the women in the DC universe were going to be elite and not just being a badass, but with fighting as well. Take that last statement how you want, but I love Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. Seeing Fiora put belt to ass on Superman multiple times, all while dropping legendary quotes like, "A good death is its own reward." Oof. God, I miss her so much. James Gunn, if you're the legend that everyone on the internet thinks you are, then you need to find some way to put the actress in a Superman project. Man of Steel is such a special film from start to finish, celebrating what makes Superman special while telling its own story. Like I said before, there will never be another Superman movie like Man of Steel, and I'm personally fine with that. I will always cherish the Snyderverse for doing things that went against the grain and creating your own universe that's different from the MCU. The results of Zack Snyder's work created a cult of die-hard fans, and I'm a proud Snyder fan. I can still love the other DC projects while still being a die-hard Snyder fan. I'm DC through and through. I bleed blue. You bleed red, I bleed blue. Everyone loves to throw shots at Zack Snyder and the Snyderverse now through TV shows, movies, and video games, when there's other people that have created far worse projects yet somehow still have a job in the industry. But I won't say any names. Man of Steel is the greatest Superman movie of all time, and there's nothing that will change that. I'm not a pocket watcher, but the numbers don't lie, seeing as it made $670 million worldwide, which would be $900 million in today's economy. If you made it through the entirety of this video, thanks for watching. If you're a fan of Man of Steel, let me know in the comments. If you think I cooked with this video to celebrate Man of Steel Day, let me know in the comments. If you think I'm a dumb Superman fan who loves murder and ore farming, you can let me know in the comments. Just don't expect me to be polite in my replies. But once again, thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment. Subscribe if you're a Superman fan, and share if you're a Superman fan. Follow me for the rest of the month as I'm going to be dropping Superman videos to celebrate Superman and Supergirl's release. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.